Imagine trying to survive in a harsh ice age. What would you eat? Forget fine dishes. This is about pure survival. This video explores the surprising and sometimes shocking dietary habits of the Neanderthals, revealing how they ate, hunted, and adapted in a frozen world simply to endure. Today, I will take you back 300,000 years to witness how our ancestors faced ice, endless snow, and skin-cutting winds. We will step into caves, see smoke mingled with the scent of roasted meat, roots and berries, hear bones being cracked for marrow, and sense the rhythm of a community where every meal was a battle for survival. This is not the story of daily life filled with comforts. It is a journey into how ancient humans observed, experimented, and transformed everything nature offered, from seeds, roots, and fruits to the flesh of giant beasts, to outlast the long and unforgiving winters. Every fragment of charcoal, every ground seed, every split bone tells a vivid tale of survival intelligence, of creativity, and of cooperation around the Neanderthal meal. Let us turn back time to see that survival in the Ice Age was not only about brute strength, but also about a primal culinary art, where food, fire, and community blended into the pulse of life. For centuries, the image of Neanderthals has been tied to heavy clubs, rough furs, and slabs of raw flesh torn beside the fire. That image, though powerful, is only half the truth. As archaeology digs deeper into ancient soil, the truth appears more subtle, more complex. In the mouths of fossil skulls, scientists have found microscopic fragments of chestnuts, pollen, and charred plant fibers. On hardened dental calculus, chemical traces reveal starch residues, tree resins, even alkaloids from medicinal herbs. This proves Neanderthals did not live on meat alone. They selected, prepared, and combined diverse foods from a harsh environment. The Neanderthal table was a strange mixture. A fallen deer provided meat, marrow, and sinew. But in the nearby rock shelters, chestnuts were ground into coarse flour, berries dried on flat stones, and roots roasted black. Their diet was not monotonous. Their survival rested on diversity. This reality dismantles the myth of the caveman diet once romanticized by modern society. There was no pure meat diet, no absolute simplicity. Instead, there was strategic flexibility, an acute observation, and a relentless exploitation of every resource available in frozen valleys. Traces of ash suggest wild grasses were roasted to reduce bitterness. In riverbank sites, shells and tiny fish bones indicate a far broader exploitation than once imagined. On cliff faces, charred wood mixed with hard-shelled seed fragments suggests fireside meals where plants and animals entered the stomachs of the community together. But the truth does not stop at nutrition. In these small remnants, researchers see a form of ancient knowledge: roasting roots to neutralize toxins, drying fruits for long preservation, or using resin for its antibacterial properties, all reflect a profound understanding of nature. Neanderthals were not simply eating what they found. They observed seasons, recognized properties of plants, and applied this knowledge to survival. This reveals the emergence of a primitive food culture. It was not only about filling the stomach, but also about maintaining health, safeguarding the group, and passing survival wisdom through generations. A flickering fire was not just warmth, but a place where charred roots became shareable meals. An empty animal skull could serve as a pot for simmering marrow and fat. Stone tools worn smooth in one corner may once have ground seeds and leaves. What might be called the ancient palate was not confined to meals. but embodied the entire way Neanderthals engaged with the world. Eating became a rhythm of survival, reflecting both the severity of climate and the inventiveness of the mind. As modern society attempts to reconstruct a caveman diet centered on red meat and protein, archaeology makes clear it was diversity and flexible food strategies that held the key to survival. Neanderthals were not cold-blooded hunters, obsessed only with sinew and flesh. They were a resourceful species, recognizing that survival in the ice lay not in eating more, but in eating wisely. And in that wisdom lies a silent legacy, proof that human intelligence was forged early, preserved in tiny plant fragments, still trapped in ancient enamel. Imagine a Europe unlike today. Instead of glowing cities, an ocean of ice stretched from grassland to forest. Winter temperatures plunged to levels unimaginable for modern humans. Ice sheets cloaked plains, winds scoured valleys, carrying snow dust and piercing cold. On the icy steppe, trees were sparse, mostly low shrubs with deep roots enduring frost. Conifers dotted mountain slopes, where snow lingered year-round. This meager vegetation shaped the entire food chain. Herds of giant grazers, mammoths, woolly rhinos, bison, roamed the plains. Behind them followed reindeer, wild horses, and bison, migrating with the seasons in search of the last grasses beneath the snow. Beyond them prowled giant predators, cave lions, enormous hyenas, cave bears, and packs of ancient wolves. The whole ecosystem functioned under a strict law. Survival hinged on conserving every bit of energy through the endless winter within this unforgiving web. Neanderthals were part of the equation. Every meal was a struggle. There were no crops, no herds of domesticated animals. Food came only through hunting, gathering, and scavenging what nature allowed. The greatest challenge was not always the hunt itself, but stability across the seasons. Summer brought berries, seeds, and roots. Autumn sometimes offered chestnuts and starchy tubers to store. Winter erased it all beneath heavy ice, forcing reliance on dried meat, stored fat, and marrow-rich bones. A single mammoth could feed a group for weeks, but sudden scarcity could push the community into crisis. Even a herd of reindeer was not always within reach, and failure in a single hunt could mean relentless hunger. Challenges also came from competition. Neanderthals did not roam the steppe alone. Other predators circled the same prey. A giant hyena or a pack of ancient wolves could steal the prize at any moment. The fall of a mammoth was never guaranteed nourishment. It was an open contest, a clash of species on the frozen plains. Now the prize belonged to a single species. It instantly became the center of the entire ecosystem, where claws, fangs, and stone tools converged. To survive, Neanderthals needed not only strength, but also strategy, community cooperation, and the ability to use every fragment of flesh, every shard of bone, every strip of hide, so that nothing was wasted. Yet there was another enemy unseen and relentless: the climate. Sudden shifts of the ice age could turn a fertile valley into a frozen desert. Rivers locked beneath ice, fish vanished, meadows lay buried for months under snow. Sometimes just a few extra weeks of severe winter were enough to collapse food reserves. In such brutal intervals, Neanderthal groups were forced to follow migrating herds or retreat deeper into caves to stretch their meager stores. Each wrong decision, choosing the wrong path, misjudging the hunting season, could mean the end of an entire community. The landscape tested not only the body but also the mind. Tracking the migrations of herds, recognizing when wild grasses sprouted, or choosing fire sites shielded from the wind were lessons carried through generations. In this frozen world, knowledge was the true wealth of survival, carved not in writing but in habits, skills, and collective memory. Archaeological traces show the Neanderthals used fire strategically, stored dry wood, and processed plants to remove toxins. Acts that seem small, yet marked the line between survival and disappearance. In this context, the Neanderthal diet was not merely about what was eaten. It was a complete adaptation to an icy world, where each seed, each strand of meat, each root decided the fragile border between life and death. In that long struggle, food became a mirror of observation, flexibility, and survival capacity, qualities that allowed this human species to dominate glacial Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. In daily rhythm, fire stood at the center of life. Ancient ash pits in caves show that Neanderthals kindled flames with flint, dry wood, and scraps of grass. Fire was not only for cooking, but for warmth through long winter nights, for drying hides into clothing, and for keeping children alive in the cold. Flames were guarded with care, for losing fire in the frost meant death at the doorstep. Food, once hunted or gathered, was rarely eaten raw. Large animals were butchered into strips of meat, hung on wooden racks or placed near fire pits to dry. Bones were smashed for marrow, a dense source of energy. Roots and seeds were crushed with stone, sometimes roasted to neutralize toxins. Charred traces in teeth and hearth ash prove that Neanderthal cuisine was not primitive, but the outcome of experimentation and accumulated knowledge. Food sharing was vital for survival. A hunted beast never fed just one individual. Meat was portioned around the fire, where the group gathered, eating and reinforcing bonds. Smaller fragments, marrow, fat, organs, were likely given to children and elders. In this distribution, food became more than nourishment. It strengthened the social fabric, binding members together in collective survival. Even the caves themselves reflected this organization. Layers of hearth ash show fires tended over generations. Open spaces inside may have been used to dry food, hang hides, or store marrow-rich bones. All were evidence that daily life in the Ice Age revolved around managing and preserving food. In such harsh lands, each meal was more than fullness. It was the fruit of intelligence, experience, and solidarity. And it is in these small details that the resilience of Neanderthals in the age of ice is most clearly revealed. On this unforgiving stage of ice, the Neanderthal menu appears both austere and abundant in its own way. Massive slabs of mammoth meat, carved with sharp stone blades, were roasted over embers or held above flames to preserve the thick fat beneath the hide. In the long cold seasons, mammoth fat was vital fuel, a fire within that sustained entire groups in the darkness of caves. Not only meat, marrow was a prized food, rich in nutrition. When long bones were struck with heavy stones, dense, fatty marrow spilled out. It could be eaten raw or warmed by fire for easier digestion. In a world where every calorie mattered, marrow was never wasted. Alongside, wild roots and tubers were pried from frozen soil, sometimes with wooden stakes or stone tools. Starchy roots, when roasted in embers, became soft and sweet, offering a different energy than meat. One can imagine charred tubers, blackened outside but golden and fragrant within, served as precious supplements when berries were scarce. Wild fruits, hard seeds, and herbs also played their role. The short summer allowed the gathering of red, green, and purple berries, When not consumed fresh, they were dried in weak sun or smoked above fires for longer storage. Hard seeds were crushed into coarse flour, pressed into crude cakes, and dried for the lean months. Together, these foods formed not a monotonous diet, but a diverse Ice Age feast. Roasted mammoth, rich marrow, charred roots, and dried berries stood side by side. Each dish reflected careful observation of nature, the skill to exploit every resource, and the transformation of hardship into sustenance for decades. Knowledge of Neanderthal diet was shaped only by great animal bones, the evidence of brutal hunts. But science in the past 2 decades has unveiled a subtler horizon. Under microscopes, silent fossils reveal a complex world of food, where ancient humans harnessed even the smallest grains of nature. In northern Spain, the cave of El Sidrón became an invaluable archive. Within fossilized dental calculus, wedged among fragments of animal muscle fibers, lie tiny starch grains, traces of ground wild cereals, chestnuts, and roasted roots. Most strikingly, the presence of compounds derived from poplar bark, the natural source of salicylic acid, reveals a rudimentary yet astonishing medical knowledge. Neanderthals turned to plants not only for sustenance, but also for healing. A fragment of hardened plaque became evidence of an adaptive intelligence that reached beyond instinct. Farther east, at Shanadar in Kurdistan, the soil around Neanderthal skeletons still holds pollen grains from multiple plant species. Though interpretations remain debated, the hypothesis that these plants were gathered as food, or even for ritual or medicinal purposes, grows ever more compelling. Alongside them, traces of charcoal, charred seeds, and shriveled berries in the cultural layers show that their hearths did not release smoke from roasting meat alone, but also the aromas of roasted tubers, parched seeds, and dried fruits. Biochemical evidence from isotopes within bones sharpens the picture further. Levels of nitrogen and carbon reflect a diet rich in animal protein, yet with striking regional variation. On frigid steppe plains, isotopic signatures point to heavy reliance on large game such as reindeer, horse, and mammoth. By rivers and lakes, the isotopic shifts reveal the addition of freshwater fish, waterfowl, and even amphibians. In Gibraltar, piles of broken shell, seal bones, and blackened sea fish within hearth ash record a coastal cuisine where land game was, mingled with the harvest of the ocean. Each discovery adds a fragment, and when assembled, the image diverges sharply from the simplistic notion of cave-dwelling carnivores. The Neanderthal diet transformed with terrain, with season, and with the rare opportunities a harsh environment allowed. In snow-clad forests, reindeer were hunted. On the steppe, wild horses were brought down and marrow extracted to sustain energy. By riversides, fish, wild grass seeds, and roasted roots were consumed. Along the coast, shellfish and marine animals added vital protein and minerals. Modern archaeology reveals Neanderthals as masters of flexibility. They were not bound to a single primitive diet. They exploited large animals, but also skillfully drew nourishment from small seeds, tough roots, and the wealth of the sea. It is this diversity that explains how a human lineage endured for hundreds of thousands of years in an icebound, shifting world, leaving behind a culinary legacy far more complex than modern imagination once allowed. Viewed across the entire frozen continent of Ice Age Europe as a culinary map, diversity emerges starkly from one landscape to another. There was no universal recipe, but distinct strategies bound to each unforgiving terrain, in coniferous forests scattered on mountain slopes. Diets relied heavily on medium-sized game and the short-lived plant season. Here, red deer, reindeer, and wild boar bones are common in archaeological layers, marking active pursuit. Charred forest roots, beech nuts, pine seeds, and berries linger in hearth remains. Forest rations, therefore, were more balanced between animal and plant, reflecting the use of brief but energy-rich growth seasons. By contrast, on the vast steppe stretching across Central and Eastern Europe, cuisine bore the imprint of giant beasts. Mammoth, woolly rhinoceros, and wild horse bones appear in density. Cutmark analysis shows Neanderthals extracted not only meat, but also marrow, brains, and fat, essential fuel for prolonged winters. Charred tubers and wild grass seeds found in ash indicate plants were not ignored, but played only a supplementary role. The steppe was a banquet of meat, where survival hinged on the fall of a giant or the scavenging of its carcass. Along the southern coasts, especially around Iberia and Gibraltar, an entirely different flavor emerged. Shell heaps, seal bones, and charred sea fish prove that Neanderthals harvested tides and deep waters. Marine foods became substitutes when large game grew scarce. Isotopic values in coastal skeletons diverge clearly from inland, reflecting a diet rich in sea products. Here meals could include seal flesh roasted on stone fires, mussels cracked open for their soft interior, and skewered sea fish charred at the edges. A rare coastal cuisine among Paleolithic groups. In river valleys of Central and Western Europe, diets took an intermediate form. Freshwater fish, water birds, frogs, and wild grass seeds blended with the meat of medium and small animals. Hearths contained fish bones, singed by flames, and brittle charred seeds, portraying a strategy of maximizing every resource rivers offered. When these fragments are set side by side, the Neanderthal culinary map emerges as proof of spatial adaptability. No single diet defined the species. Instead, countless variations appeared. Forest diets rich in nuts and fruit, steppe diets laden with meat and fat, river diets balanced and versatile, and coastal diets infused with marine resources. This stratification of rations enabled Neanderthals to occupy Europe's divergent landscapes and to endure through an age of ice and uncertainty, placed within the grander picture. It becomes clear that Neanderthals were the first to pioneer a distinctly human concept of dietary diversity. Not bound to one source, they bent to each environment, hunting giants of the plains, gathering fruit and roots in the forests, harvesting shellfish along the coast, and seizing fish and seeds by rivers. Each land left a dietary signature, yet all reveal the same capacity to observe, to adapt, and to transform everything edible into sustenance. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, Neanderthals demonstrated that survival lay not only in hunting power, but in linking humans to their environment through food. And in that beginning lay the foundation for the multifaceted culinary traditions of humankind. On the frozen steppes of the Pleistocene, the silhouettes of mammoth herds moved slowly across the plains. Shaggy coats rippled in snowy winds, colossal tusks piercing the ice crust like nature's spears. Beside them roamed the woolly rhinoceros, massive, sinewed, its thick skin draped in coarse fur, a living fortress of the cold. These were not only icons of untamed strength, but vital reservoirs of energy in the depths of winter. Confronted with towering masses of muscle and colossal tusks, the short yet robust frame of the Neanderthal could not rely on speed or sheer strength alone. The only weapon that could balance the scale was organizational intelligence, patience, and resilient technique. Archaeological sites reveal that Neanderthals knew how to exploit terrain. On steppe plains interspersed with marshes, traces of fractured bones, wooden stakes, and sharpened stones suggest a strategy of driving giant herds into low-lying ground. When a mammoth stumbled into mud, its immense limbs trapped by sticky clay and thin ice. That was the moment Levallois's stone-tipped spears were launched. Cut marks on bones show strikes aimed precisely at chest and abdomen, places where organs were most vulnerable. A single lethal wound could bring down a beast weighing several tons, transforming it into a food source that sustained a community for weeks. In mountainous regions, cliffs became natural traps. By encirclement and pressure, entire herds of mammoth or rhinoceros could be driven toward precipices. At La Côte de Saint-Brelade on Jersey Island, the unusual concentration of dozens of mammoth skeletons demonstrates the scale of coordinated hunts. This was not a spontaneous act, but a calculated campaign, requiring the cooperation of many individuals to control the movement of giant animals beyond terrain traps. Neanderthals also wielded closer-range weapons with strategy. Long wooden spears tipped with sharp flint could be hurled from a safe distance or thrust directly once prey was weakened. Microscopic analysis of spear tips shows traces of blood and animal proteins, matching the ribs of mammoth and rhinoceros, proof of successful confrontations with giants. Not every hunt ended in triumph. A swing of tusks from an adult mammoth could crush bones. The charge of a rhinoceros could tear bodies apart. For this reason, Neanderthals combined bravery with opportunism. Alongside active hunting, they exploited natural carcasses, beasts that perished in snowstorms, or remains abandoned by other predators. In permafrost layers, mammoth and rhinoceros skeletons bear intricate cut marks, evidence that Neanderthals arrived later to extract flesh, fat, and marrow. Nothing was wasted. Thick hides became winter coverings. Long sinews served as cords for weapons. Massive bones turned into tool frames. Meat and fat nourished the group. Marrow was extracted by cracking heavy bones. And even fat around organs was scraped, stored, or roasted over fire. Thus, Neanderthal hunting was not simply a duel of humans against giants. It was the fusion of observation, organizational intelligence, and total resource exploitation. On icy steppes, each hunt was a gamble of life and death, yet also a testament to ingenuity, the quality that enabled Neanderthals to survive for hundreds of thousands of years in unforgiving environments. Division of labor did not stop at distributing tasks by strength, but reflected a hierarchy of experience. Individuals who had survived many perilous hunts often assumed leadership, determining when to tighten the encirclement or retreat. Hand signals, rhythmic knocks on stone, or short vocal calls carried on the wind were not mere hunting cues, but a shared language shaping collective communication. Gender and age further enriched this structure. The elderly, no longer able to confront large beasts directly, became reservoirs of knowledge, knowing where herds passed, when the steppe froze solid enough for an ambush, and which routes provided energy before the hunt. Women, beyond processing game, sometimes joined smaller hunts for hare or young deer, sustaining community rhythm. Children, by watching and attempting smaller tasks, entered the communal circle early, absorbed into a system both disciplined and inclusive. All these details reveal that, beneath the icebound surface of the Paleolithic world lay a structured social order, where hunting was not mere acquisition of meat, but a framework of organization, roles, and shared knowledge confirmed, sustained, and transmitted within this larger picture. The processing of plants by Neanderthals becomes vivid when imagined in specific gestures. Chestnuts, gathered from beneath leaf litter or rock crevices, were not only eaten raw but also cleaned, dried, and ground with stone into coarse flour. This could be mixed with water, animal fat, or starch from roots to form digestible food masses. Roots, sometimes containing natural toxins, were sliced, roasted on embers, or baked in earthen pits, detoxifying them and softening their fibrous structure, transforming the inedible into a vital energy source during severe winters. Berries, quick to spoil if left whole, were spread on stone to dry in summer sunlight or stored in leather pouches, becoming reserves of vitamins and antioxidants for the long cold season. Cut marks, grinding traces, and charred residues in ash reveal more than eating. They testify to careful observation and experiment. Neanderthals learned when roots were sufficiently roasted to eliminate toxins, which seeds required parching for digestion, and which berries could be stored long without decay. Each action embodied accumulated collective experience, refined across generations, reflecting deep survival knowledge. Evidence also shows that Neanderthals combined plants with animal foods to optimize nutrition. Chestnut flour mixed with fat or marrow not only increased energy density but aided digestion and nutrient absorption. Roasted berries or roots eaten with meat provided fiber, vitamins, and minerals, balancing the heavy animal-based diet of icy landscapes. This image opens a wholly different view of Neanderthals. They were not mere meat-dependent beings. They were meticulous observers, exploiting every plant resource, learning to process, preserve, combine, and optimize their meals. Each dish was a delicate balance of vitality, environmental knowledge, and culinary technique. It was this blend of hunting and gathered, processed plants that enabled Neanderthals to sustain life in the harshest conditions, while creating a prehistoric cuisine that was inventive, diverse, and adaptive. Expanding further, the processing of plants reveals the planning ability of the Neanderthals. They did not forage at random, but chose the right time to harvest, store, and prepare according to the seasons. Seeds, tubers, and fruits were kept in dry places to avoid mold. Roots and berries were roasted or sun-dried in batches, both for immediate consumption and for later use. This was not impulsive behavior, but evidence of organization, of knowledge passed down within the community, the first steps toward a systematic culinary culture in human history, in the shadow of their image as hunters of giant beasts. A subtle truth is often overlooked. The Neanderthals were also gatherers. What archaeology has uncovered in fire residues, in fossilized dental plaque, and in layers of ash has painted a broader picture of their diet. In Shanada Cave, in the Kurdistan region, the soil layers around skeletons once preserved pollen from many plant species. Although there is debate about whether this was a trace of burial or of meals, the presence of pollen points to a connection between Neanderthals and plants. They not only collected but also selected, recognizing the best moments for harvesting when seeds, tubers, and fruits carried the highest nutritional value at El Sidran, Spain. Analysis of dental plaque revealed starch grains from chestnuts, wild lentils, and even traces of herbs containing salicylic acid, a compound similar to aspirin. This suggests that Neanderthals may have used plants to reduce pain, treat ailments, or at least knew how to incorporate the bitterness of medicinal herbs into meals. They went beyond gathering raw materials, developing techniques of preparation, washing seeds before grinding, removing hard shells or toxic parts, mixing with water, fat, or even scraps of meat to create pastes that could be cooked on hot stones or embers at many other sites. Charred nutshells, carbonized root fragments, and grinding marks on stones reveal food processing. Chestnuts could be crushed, mixed with water or animal fat, and baked over fire into coarse cakes. Starchy roots could be roasted to soften them, remove natural toxins, and make them easier to digest. Berries, though sweet and quick to spoil, could be dried on rocks or stored in animal skins for gradual use. Some seeds and berries could be mashed, mixed with root flour or fat, forming portable energy balls suitable for seasonal migrations. These small details open up an unexpected dimension. The Neanderthals did not simply eat plants raw. They processed them. They turned hard seeds into flour, bitter roots into edible food, perishable berries into stored provisions. In some cases, herbs were lightly roasted before use, to remove toxins and enhance flavor, reflecting both experimentation and awareness of chemical reactions in plants. This is evidence of deep environmental knowledge, knowing which plants were safe, which were poisonous, which could serve as medicine, and which combined well with meat for better nutrition. In the icy world where meat provided the main energy source, plants played an indispensable supplementary role. Starch from tubers, vitamins from berries, nutrients from seeds, and even medicinal compounds from herbs together formed a diverse diet, balancing energy, vitamins, and beneficial chemicals. Evidence of plant processing shows that Neanderthals were not merely cold-blooded hunters. They were meticulous observers, experimenters, and learners of the flora around them. Each ground seed, each roasted root, each carefully prepared herb was a step forward in understanding nature for survival, reflecting dexterity, adaptive intelligence, and the survival wisdom of the first humans in the frozen world. Beyond plant preparation alone, the Neanderthals also knew how to combine meat, marrow, and plant ingredients to create meals that were both nourishing and digestible. When a mammoth or deer was brought down, the lean meat, fat, and marrow were not only shared within the group, but sometimes roasted together, with roots and ground seeds to enhance both flavor and energy. Starchy tubers, when roasted with fat or marrow broth, became a carbohydrate source that supplemented calories and helped the body absorb energy from proteins and fats more efficiently. Seeds and berries, normally quick to spoil, were mixed into cooked meat or fat, forming food bundles that combined sweetness, saltiness, and richness. This process not only preserved food longer, but also distributed nutrition, giving the group a stable energy supply during prolonged winters. At some sites, traces of carbonized residues on stones and animal bones suggest that Neanderthals experimented with cooking these mixtures directly on embers, softening meat, releasing starches from tubers, while retaining flavor and nutrients. This combination also hints at the use of plants as seasonings or flavor enhancers, with leaves, roots, or fruits mixed into hot marrow to balance bitterness, enrich aroma, and aid digestion. Each meal thus became more than mere sustenance. It was a strategic balance of nutrition, preservation, and taste optimization. A frozen banquet forged through generations of observation and experimentation. Such techniques demonstrate the Neanderthals' deep understanding of food relationships, meat and fat as energy sources, marrow as a supplier of essential minerals and lipids, roots, seeds, and berries as providers of carbohydrates, vitamins, and medicinal compounds. Their flexibility and creativity in blending foods prove that the Neanderthal diet was not simply about survival, but also about an art of living, a culinary identity in the frozen landscape. At the Neanderthals' frozen banquet, marrow was one of the most treasured foods. Extracted from the femur or ribs of giant animals, it was roasted directly on glowing embers, the fat dripping into the firewood, releasing a warm, energy-rich flavor. A small piece of marrow not only provided calories, but also essential fatty acids and minerals vital during the long, harsh winters. Fatty meat from deer, bison, or mammoths was sliced into strips or small chunks and roasted over fire to preserve its tenderness and natural sweetness. When paired with starchy roots, the fatty meat became a digestible meal, rich in calories and protein, while the roots provided slow-release energy, sustaining strength in freezing conditions. Meat from smaller animals, such as rabbits, birds, or freshwater fish was also prepared similarly, often wrapped with leaves, roots, or berries to preserve and enhance flavor. Berries, though quick to spoil, were dried on stones or hung in animal skins, then eaten with meat or mixed with ground seeds into small cakes. The natural sweetness of berries balanced the richness of marrow and fat, while providing essential vitamins and antioxidants that helped Neanderthals resist disease and maintain health. Chestnuts, wild lentils, and other hard seeds were crushed, mixed with water or fat, and baked over embers into coarse cakes, easier to chew and a source of starch for long-term energy. Roots, drawn from plants beneath frozen soils, were roasted or baked on hot stones. Some required soaking or thorough roasting to remove natural toxins, transforming them into safe, digestible sources of carbohydrates. When combined with fat or marrow, roots became the foundation of meals, aiding digestion and delivering steady energy. This combination, roasted marrow, fatty meat, roots, ground seeds, dried berries, formed a frozen banquet full of colors and flavors, where each mouthful was calculated for nutrition, energy, and preservation. Every meal not only sustained the body but reflected the intelligence, processing skills, and subtle observations of Neanderthals in a harsh environment. In damp caves and cold valleys, fire was more than light, more than warmth. It was the bridge between raw, unyielding food and energy easily absorbed by the body. Fire created a zone of safety between the frozen outside world and human flesh, transforming food into vitality rather than coarse matter. Archaeological evidence from many Neanderthal sites, such as Kebara Cave in the Levant, or the thick ash layers in Abric Romani in Spain, shows that fire was maintained in a controlled way. Charcoal deposits arranged in circular hearths, sometimes tucked against rock walls, proved that these were not random flames. Neanderthals had learned to build and sustain fire continuously, choosing wind-sheltered positions, observing smoke and heat to optimize cooking. Each hearth was a hub of life, for cooking, for warmth, for gathering in the frozen dark. Fire transformed meals. When mammoth or woolly rhinoceros meat was laid over embers, proteins in the flesh broke down, making it softer and easier to chew. Fire killed parasites and microbes hidden in raw tissue, vital when food sources could carry disease. With starchy roots, fire unlocked hidden energy. Many bitter or mildly toxic tubers became edible once roasted. Starches were converted, releasing more energy in digestible form. Not only meat and roots, but also flavor itself changed with fire. Berries could be dried on hot stones, preserving sweetness for longer, or lightly roasted to soften them, and aid digestion. Large bones were set in fire to crack open, releasing marrow, a prized source of fat and energy. Charred traces on stone tools and flat rocks suggest that Neanderthals also used smoke to preserve meat, roots, and even seeds, creating long-term stores to withstand hard winters. Fire, then, was not just a defense against the night. It was the kitchen of evolution. Each roasted joint of meat, each boiled root, was a step in optimizing energy for survival under extreme conditions. Through fire, Neanderthals could consume foods once indigestible, extend their dietary range, and maintain the strength for extended hunts. Fire was also a watchtower. Its heat, smoke, and light revealed predators, signaled danger, and coordinated group activity. In the icebound world, where cold could kill anyone deprived of energy, fire became a lifeline. Without it, meat remained. Coarse burden, roots, tough and bitter masses. Many plants, only poisons. With it, all were transformed into energy, nourishment, and survival. Each fire was a survival center, a primeval kitchen where Neanderthals reshaped the harsh landscape into sustaining meals, managing energy, preserving food, and binding communities together in the frozen rhythm of life. On cold stone floors, beside glowing hearths, Neanderthals learned to combine meat and plants into balanced, nourishing meals. Mammoth bones split open, marrow flowing into roasted roots, softening starch and creating dense energy mixtures. Segments of bison meat were laid beside wild turnips, mingled with crushed chestnuts, providing not only protein and fat, but also vitamins, minerals, and carbohydrates needed in freezing climates. Berries, though scarce, were dried or lightly roasted over coals to preserve sweetness and prevent spoilage. When mixed with marrow, fat, or animal tallow, they produced a blend both nutritious and flavorful, a form of temporary stored food that was easy to digest and nutritionally rich. These mixtures could be eaten immediately or stored in rock crevices and animal hides, creating vital reserves for prolonged winters and times of failed hunts. Cooking techniques varied by food type. Large cuts of meat were slow roasted over embers, so proteins softened without burning fat. Roots were wrapped in leaves or hides and baked beside coals, cooking evenly while retaining moisture. Berries and seeds were placed at the edge of the fire, gently dried to preserve flavor. This careful interplay of fire, heat, and placement optimized nutrient absorption, turning each meal into a complete source of sustenance, balancing calories and vitamins through the Ice Age. Such complete meals reflected Neanderthals. Strategic knowledge, meat and marrow provided protein and fat. Roots and seeds supplied carbohydrates. Berries contributed vitamins and bioactive compounds. Fire transformed all into safe, digestible, and lasting food. Each meal was not merely food, but a survival strategy, a way to control energy and optimize resources in the frozen world where failure into sustenance meant death. The cycles of Ice Age seasons bore little resemblance to today's gentle rhythm. Summers came short and fragile, filled with long light and a burst of life. Winters stretched bleak and biting, turning grasslands and sparse forests into frozen wastelands. Neanderthals lived in this opposing cycle, forced to craft sharp strategies of adaptation. In summer, the frozen steppe turned into a vast green carpet. Tall grasses, wildflowers, and shrubs yielded seeds, berries, and roots that were easy to find. Migrating herds, such as reindeer and bison, and even giants like mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses, followed their ancient routes toward summer pastures. It was a season of abundance, when a single successful hunt could bring in hundreds of kilograms of meat and fat. Chestnuts, pine nuts, and edible roots were dug up, stored, or roasted over fire for gradual use. Seeds and berries were dried or crushed into energy-rich mixtures, easy to carry over long distances while retaining nutritional value. These foods were shared according to the needs of each group, supporting children, elders, and hunters during extended expeditions. Winter, however, erased that scene. Grass withdrew beneath ice, trees stood silent, and berries remained only in memory. Scarcity became the harsh rule. Food came mainly from animal carcasses left behind, from fat reserves stored during earlier hunts, or from the rare prey caught in the freezing dark. Archaeological evidence at El Sidron, Spain, and Spy, Belgium, shows that during such severe winters, Neanderthals shifted almost entirely to diets rich in animal meat and fat, with plant traces nearly absent in dental plaque. Beyond consuming meat and fat directly, marrow extracted from large bones was roasted or boiled to release precious lipids, an abundant source of energy, vital for circulation and endurance in the cold. This stark contrast demanded not only physical resilience, but also foresight. Summer was not only for eating, but also for storing. Meat could be sliced thin, air-dried, or smoked. Roots were dug and hidden in cold earth caches. Some hypotheses suggest that the severe cold itself provided Neanderthals with natural freezers, preserving meat for weeks or even months. Seeds and berries were also sorted according to how well they kept. Fragile fruits were consumed or processed quickly, while durable varieties were stored as winter provisions. Within this rhythm of survival, Neanderthals were not passive hunters, but organisms shaping their lifestyle around the cycle of the seasons. Summer was for gathering, storing, and building energy reserves. Winter was for consuming, conserving, and extracting every fragment of meat, every layer of fat, every seed and root. Between these extremes, organization, division of labor, and adaptation marked the path of survival. Observing nature, predicting herd movements, and preserving resources from abundance to face scarcity testify to Neanderthal survival intelligentsia, refined strategy honed across hundreds of thousands of years in lands of snow and ice in such a frozen world. Death came not only from predators' fangs, but also from prolonged winter hunger. A single successful hunt could yield hundreds of kilograms of meat, yet without preservation, it would rot in days. Here, archaeological traces and scientific hypotheses show that Neanderthals were not only hunters, but also masters of storage. Charred bones and layers of ash at sites like Abric, Romani, Spain, suggest the use of smoking. Meat was hung near fires, so smoke permeated its fibers. Smoke slowed spoilage, creating a protective barrier against bacterial invasion. This may have been a simple technique, but it carried life-saving value, allowing Neanderthals to maintain protein supplies for weeks. Some hypotheses even suggest meat was layered with strong-smelling leaves or herbs to improve preservation while adding flavor. Alongside smoking, drying left its mark in microscopic analysis. Thin slices of meat were spread on stones or branches under summer sun or winter winds, slowly losing moisture. This reduced weight made transport easier during herd-following migrations and prolonged edibility. A single strip of dried meat, dense with energy, could mean survival after failed hunts. Not only meat, but roots and berries were also dried to retain nutrition, reduce spoilage risk, and ease gradual consumption through the winter. Most remarkable of all, The icy Pleistocene environment gifted Neanderthals with natural freezers. Some hypotheses propose that meat from mammoths and other great beasts was buried beneath snow or in frozen caves. Harsh cold preserved it edible for months. Roots and berries, too, could be cached under ice, protected from scavengers while extending preservation. This was not passive adaptation, but a clever exploitation of natural conditions, one of the foundations for surviving lean winters. Food storage, therefore, was a strategy inseparable from hunting. Without it, the energy gained in times of abundance would vanish quickly. With it, Neanderthals turned the instability of nature into a manageable cycle at least within the limits of fire, wind, and ice. Storage not only ensured survival, but enabled fair distribution within groups, sustained strength, supported long hunts, and shielded communities from famine in the hardest months. Smoking, drying, and natural freezing became survival hallmarks. Survivals, refined survival intelligence. The Pleistocene steppe of Europe never stood still. Grasslands, sparse forests, and glaciers expanded and retreated with the pulse of climate. More crucially, life itself moved seasonally. Reindeer herds departed north as winter came, wild horses sought warmer valleys, and mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses followed ancient paths toward summer meadows. These migrations created rhythms that, if unread, meant hunger and exhaustion to endure. Neanderthals had to read those rhythms. Hunts were not random. Archaeological sites, such as La Cat Distabrelade, Jersey, reveal that ambush locations were chosen deliberately. Narrow gorges, cliff edges, and habitual migration corridors became natural traps to drive mammoths or wild horses. Clusters of stone, spear points, pit traces, and concentrated animal bones reveal not only successful hunts, but also careful preparation, long-term observation, and memory of seasonal paths. Hunting success depended on knowledge of migration routes, those invisible roads across the steppe, repeated for thousands of years, known only to persistent watchers who could recall and exploit them. Alongside that, local resources also determined survival. A cave near a freshwater spring, a zone rich in edible roots, or a forest full of nut-bearing trees carried the value of a natural storehouse. Analyses of Neanderthal dental calculus from El Sidron, Spain, revealed traces of both local plants and medicinal herbs, proving that they exploited what was available around them, not relying solely on large game hunting. Each plant, whether starchy roots or tart sweet berries, was selected according to season, then processed or stored to secure a stable energy supply for the group. It was this combination of following migrating herds and exploiting local resources that formed a dual strategy. Mobility provided abundant protein and fat from large animals, fueling the body during the hunting season. Local exploitation supplemented this with energy from seeds, roots, and fruits, small in proportion but reliable in the diet. If only one of the two strategies were followed, survival would have been fragile in the face of climate shifts. Through such flexibility, however, Neanderthals endured hundreds of thousands of years of ice, adjusting their rhythm of life to each landscape and season nature imposed. On this map, without words or drawings, existing only in collective memory, that migration routes were the arteries of life, while local resources were its daily breath. The union of these two factors not only ensured survival for small groups, but allowed communities to maintain strength, distribute food efficiently, and fully exploit both temporary and long-term environments. By combining knowledge of seasonal migrations with awareness of local abundance. Neanderthals created a flexible survival system where constant movement did not lead to exhaustion, and local resources became a stabilizing foundation, carrying them through long, frigid winters with enough strength, vitality, and hunting ability to continue. Neanderthals did not rely solely on immediate observation, but recorded recurring signs to anticipate the seasons. As daylight lengthened, river ice melted slowly, and grass returned in patches. They knew the time for hunting and gathering had opened. Each plant, from underground roots to low-growing berries, was tracked. Pollen falling on stone, faint animal tracks, and herd movements were read as signals. Through them, Neanderthals built a natural calendar, a time map without writing that told when roots were ripe, when berries were sweetest, and when reindeer crossed the meadows. Week by week, they adjusted plans. One week could be spent trapping small animals for quick protein. The next was reserved for setting snares or ambushes along the fixed routes of reindeer or mammoths. On any given day, tasks were divided. Some collected roots, others gathered nuts and berries, while hunters prepared traps or waited in migration corridors. Elders and children, though not directly hunting, played roles of observation, marking weather signs, noting plant cycles, and managing stored provisions, inspecting reserves of fat, marrow, and processed roots. Every activity aligned with season and week. The rhythm of survival became as precise as a natural clock. When winter arrived, steps were already prepared. Dried summer meat was combined with fat. Stored roots were cooked before freezing solid. Dried berries were evenly distributed among the group through continuous observation and memory of natural signs. Neanderthals anticipated the harshest days, securing energy and food supplies until spring returned. These strategies, weekly observation, monthly planning, role division by age and ability, transformed Neanderthal groups into flexible survival systems. They did not simply react to the environment, but actively shaped their behavior to extract its fullest resources. In a world of ice, this power of foresight and planning was the key to survival, turning harsh stretches into manageable intervals, and limited resources into sufficient stores for the whole group. In the broader landscape of the Ice Age, Neanderthals were not merely isolated hunters or gatherers. They were architects of a survival mapper system woven from seasonal knowledge, awareness of local resources, skills of processing and storage, and community cooperation around the fire. Summer was the season of abundance, with light flooding the icy steppe. Neanderthals recognized the rhythm of vegetation, knowing where to find starchy roots, ripe berries, and nutritious seeds. They moved with herds, predicting ancient migration paths of mammoths, wild horses, and reindeer, choosing gorges, valleys, or open meadows as hunting grounds. During these movements, meat, fat roots, and seeds were gathered, processed, and stored, building a living reserve amid shifting nature. When winter came, the survival map came alive in practice. Meat was smoked, laid to dry on cold rocks, or buried in natural ice. Roots were roasted to reduce toxins. Berries were dried to preserve vitamins, all combined with fat, marrow, and crushed seeds into complete meals, nutritious, digestible, and sustaining. Fire not only warmed the body, but illuminated the life of the group, where each individual learned, shared, and preserved survival knowledge. In every cave, every hearth, every layer of ash and plant debris marked a point on that survival map. Seasonal knowledge, local resources, and processing skills did not exist separately, but interlaced into a logical web, enabling Neanderthal communities to outlast long, severe winters. Each meal, each hunt, each roasted or chosen route was a step along that map connecting knowledge with action, survival with community. Looking back, Neanderthal survival map stands as complete testimony to human practical intelligence in an icy world. It drew together every layer: plant processing, fire-based preparation of meat and roots, intelligent storage, seasonal rhythm, local exploitation, food culture, and communal cooperation. Through this integration, Neanderthals not only survived, but left traces of an early food culture legacy of survival, carrying the taste of the past, teaching that survival has always been the outcome of observation, experimentation, sharing, and planning in a world of challenges. Food was not only energy intake, it was also a mark of thought, of repeated habit, and sometimes of creativity in exploiting nature. When archaeology looks into layers of ash, plant fragments, or fossilized dental plaque, the question is no longer what did they eat, but how did they eat. Neanderthals, through such traces, reveal intentional preparation, a pattern repeated many times, the first step toward the concept of a recipe. Evidence from Shanadar Cave Iraq and El Sidron. SPY-NA reveals a subtle interplay between meat, tubers, seeds, and herbs. Legumes, grass seeds, berries, and aromatic plants with essential oils have been found together, suggesting they were not consumed in isolation, but combined. Even ingredients that are difficult to eat, such as wild grass seeds or bitter roots, appear in dental calculus, indicating that they were cooked, fire-treated, or ground into digestible, less toxic forms. This combination was not accidental, but the outcome of accumulated knowledge across generations. Tested, observed, and passed down. Fire, once again, played a central role in this culinary language. Meat roasted together with roots, seeds, or berries produced mixtures both nourishing and soft, easier to chew and digest. Animal fat, combined with dried berries or crushed seeds, created primitive energy cakes, complete foods rich in protein, fat, and carbohydrates, providing sustained energy during long hunting days. These were not mere meals, but calculated nutritional assemblages, arranged by proportion, by placement, by availability of ingredients. Each landscape offered different resources, and Neanderthals knew how to exploit them fully. In northern regions, reindeer meat, hides, and fat were blended with pine nuts, roots, and dried berries. In the Mediterranean, game was smaller, but tubers more abundant, chestnuts and herbs more aromatic. Repetition in preparation, methods roasting, grinding, mixing produced patterns. Early recipes, unrecorded in writing, yet preserved in collective memory, transmitted from generation to generation. This opens the vision that, around fires in stone shelters, Neanderthals were not merely sharing roasted meat, but also passing on habits, selecting ingredients, arranging proportions, applying fire correctly. It was a form of culinary language without words, without script bound to survival, practiced continuously, inherited across lifetimes. Each meal became a survival lesson, an experiment, a repeated standard, shaping a proto-culinary identity and proving that Neanderthals did not simply eat to live, but ate to understand and manage their environment in the ancient ashes, in fire pits long cooled over tens of thousands of years. Archaeologists have uncovered not only food traces, but also signs of collective life. Neanderthals did not eat alone. They gathered around fires, shared their game, and turned meals into communal rituals, spaces of both subsistence and social connection. Smoke rising from embers mingled with the scent of roasted meat and charred roots, filling caves with an atmosphere that was at once practical and cultural. At sites such as Bollamar, Cave Spain, or Communal France, researchers have recorded large quantities of animal bones, cut, split, and roasted in parallel. These were not portions for an individual, but food for an entire group. Mammoth bones, wild horse, bison, even woolly rhinoceros, were butchered and distributed around hearth areas, suggesting seating arrangements, task divisions, and coordinated resource sharing. Each fire pit functioned as a communal table where food was processed, cooked, and apportioned systematically. Cut marks on bones reveal not only butchery techniques, but also possible role specialization. One individual may have handled meat cutting, another marrow extraction, a third tending the fire to maintain proper heat for roasting meat and roots. Traces of charcoal and fuel suggest coordinated effort in supplying wood, keeping flames alive. The entire sequence formed an organized chain of actions. Where meals were more than energy intake, they embodied social cohesion and community management. Some scholars hypothesize that such communal feasts carried ritual weight, or at least functioned as mechanisms to strengthen group ties. A large kill was not only food, but an opportunity to reaffirm bonds. Who hunted skillfully, who shared fairly, who held authority. Food was not distributed randomly. It appears to have followed patterns of role, age, and contribution. Through this, social relations were reinforced. Knowledge was passed down, and cooperative hunting and food processing remained stable across generations. Even plant residues in dental calculus point to diverse sharing. Some individuals consumed more tubers and seeds, others more fatty meat, creating nutritional balance across the group. Herbs or berries may have been ground, mixed, or roasted with meat and roots, producing blended meals. This not only optimized energy, but reflected careful observation and understanding of food values. Adapted to Ice Age hardship. Thus, the Neanderthal meal was not a simple biological act. It was a social arena where fire warmed bodies and illuminated bonds of knowledge and cooperation. In the cave's shadow, smoke mingling with roasted meat, charred roots, berries, and toasted seeds, shared meals created an invisible thread of community. They were an early cultural identity, a way of maintaining life and order of aidance that even amid harsh glacial landscapes, Neanderthals not only endured but built structured, meaningful communal life. For Neanderthals, food was more than fuel. Behind the motions of cutting meat, smoking, roasting roots, or grinding seeds lay an unspoken social code, a survival script repeated through time. Each hearth was not merely a cooking site, but a hub of life, where collective memory was forged and transmitted, where knowledge of hunting, processing, and storing food was accumulated, tested, and preserved. When a massive animal was felled, its meat, fat, and marrow became a social resource. Distribution and shared consumption not only secured survival, but also defined order, roles, and authority. Who cut the marrow-rich bones? Who received tender meat? Who tended the fire or prepared rootsall? Reflected networks of community, training, coordination, and maintaining tradition. Roles, duties, and food-sharing sequences may have been observed as templates, stabilizing social life. Food was also a bridge between humans and their environment. Choosing medicinal plants, edible roots, or combining nutrient sources was not only pragmatic but embodied ecological knowledge, understanding plant cycles, hidden toxins, nutritional value, and best preservation methods. This knowledge passed from generation to generation, forming an unwritten culinary tradition, a system of memory preserved through shared meals. Each time the group moved to a new valley, they carried with them knowledge of which plants were edible, which roots needed roasting, which meats were best smoked, and how combinations produced meals of balance and endurance. It was these habits that gradually formed the foundations of an early food culture, not recipes written on paper, but formulas held in collective memory, non-written language understood by every member. Each carefully prepared meal not only nourished the body but reinforced group identity, maintained cohesion, and shaped rules of division, sharing, and learning within the community. The smoke of hearths, the smell of roasting meat, the bitterness of roots, or the sweetness of berries became part of a collective ritual of learning, where survival practices were repeated and tested across generations at a deeper level. Food may also have carried ritual meaning. Traces of bones treated in special ways, or food placed beside the dead in certain burials, suggest that eating was not only tied to daily survival, but also extended into the symbolic and spiritual sphere. A meal could serve to commemorate the deceased, strengthen group ties, or mark special events in the cycle of survival. Thus, the preparation and consumption of food by Neanderthals was not merely a biological act, but a vivid social and cultural map. It expressed community life, where survival, knowledge, experience, and ritual converged. In the cold ashes, the shadow of culture flickered, foreshadowing a profound evolutionary chapter, where Homo sapiens would later elevate cuisine into a global art. For Neanderthals, however, it began with survival, with community, and with the hearth in the cave, the remnants preserved in teeth, in hearth ashes, in butchered bones, tell not only of individual meals, but also unveil the complexity of survival knowledge. Food choices, methods of preparation, and resource distribution reflect a survival strategy deeply rooted in evolution, where body, brain, and society were all shaped through meals that were calculated, coordinated, and shared. The ability to hunt massive animals while also exploiting seeds, tubers, berries, and herbs demonstrates a flexibility surpassing the image of a simple predator. This dietary diversity not only shaped a versatile digestive system, but also fueled the brain with varied nutrients. Protein and fat from meat provided energy for movement and hunting. Starch from tubers and seeds supplied long-lasting fuel. Vitamins and minerals from plants supported overall health and disease resistance. This combination heightened survival efficiency, reduced risks of nutritional deficits in harsh seasons, and laid the groundwork for more complex cognitive behaviors, from observing the environment to remembering seasonal cycles and animal migrations. Placed within the broader human story, Neanderthals reveal a crucial link: the use of fire to transform food, the creativity in storing, processing, and combining resources, and the communal habits built around meals sowed the seeds of later food cultures. Feasts around the fire were not only energy intake, but also arenas of experimentation, where coordination, division, and transmission of knowledge were honed. The repetition of food preparation and organization across generations created a protoculinary tradition that was at once survival and social structure. The flavors of Neanderthal heritage therefore do not end in ancient hearths or fossilized teeth, They echo in how modern humans understand the bond between food, body, and society, a silent bridge from the icy past to today's turbulent world. The core principles Neanderthals embodied: diversifying resources, balancing nutrition, sharing, and cooperating, of the foundation of all later ideas about meals, diet, and food culture. In the convergence of heat, taste, survival knowledge, and social connection, each Neanderthal meal was not only survival but also a lesson in creativity and adaptation, timeless in value, teaching modern humans to see food as inseparable from evolution and culture. Through close examination of the surviving evidence, from fossilized dental calculus to microscopic cut marks on animal bones, the picture of Neanderthal diet becomes clearer. From this emerges a surprising comparison between the meals of that extinct lineage and the tables of modern humans. The most striking similarity lies in diversity. Neanderthals did not live on hunted meat alone. Their teeth preserved starch grains from seeds and tubers, as well as chemical traces of herbs. This is a picture remarkably close to the multi-component diets of humans today, where protein, starch, and fiber are combined to nourish the body. Even dependence on cooking techniques, from heat to improve digestibility, to smoking and drying for preservation, formed an evolutionary bridge leading to modern culinary variety. The combinations were not random. Tubers and seeds gave sustained energy. Fatty meat offered immediate fuel during hunting seasons. Berries and herbs supplied essential micronutrients, all balanced according to physiology and climate. Yet differences are also clear. Neanderthals relied heavily on large game for protein, rich in energy but rare and difficult to hunt. Meat and fat were the most prized, each successful kill becoming both a meal and a strategic store. By contrast, modern meals rely largely on domesticated livestock, cultivated grains, and processed foods, abundant and stable, but far removed from the harsh seasonal rhythms and immediate survival trials of Ice Age life. Neanderthals lived within an unforgiving ecological cycle: summers with fleeting berries, seeds, and roots, winters with stored meat and marrow. Modern humans, in turn, have leveled these constraints with agriculture, refrigeration, and global supply chains. Another subtle difference lies in the approach to flavor and function. Whereas modern humans employ spices and seasonings for variety, Neanderthals likely used herbs in dual roles, both food and medicine. Traces of medicinal plants in fossilized mouths suggest a rudimentary knowledge base, distant yet foundational to today's food medicine traditions. They mixed bitter seeds and roots with fat, or roasted them to soften texture, reduce toxins, and improve palatability. Practical recipes repeated for generations, serving survival while building collective experience. Through this comparison, the Neanderthal diet emerges not merely as a pattern of past consumption, but as a mirror reflecting what humanity has preserved, transformed, or abandoned along the evolutionary path. It reveals that adaptation to nature was once the key to survival, and, in a broader sense, it continues to serve as a reminder of the balance between body, environment, and food. This image opens up a profound anthropological lesson. Modern humans, despite advanced technology and abundant supplies, can still learn from the subtlety, calculation, and coordination of protein, starch, and micronutrients that Neanderthals practiced. Tens of thousands of years of basic but vital survival principles that underlie every wise and balanced meal in contemporary life. For decades, The image of the Neanderthal diet had been confined to the notion of big game hunting. But with advances in archaeology, biochemistry, and microscopic analysis, layers of mist have been lifted, revealing a culinary world far richer and more intricate than earlier assumptions. Ancient DNA sequencing from dental calculus allows the identification of plant, fungal, and even microbial residues linked to digestion. Stable isotope analysis in bones reveals the ratios of protein, fat, and signatures of food sources ranging from hunted animals to tubers, seeds, berries, and herbs. Laboratory experiments reconstructing stone tools show how seeds were ground, husks removed, or tubers pounded, and how these were combined with meat and fat to optimize energy and flavor. All of this expands the boundaries of understanding once thought fixed, while highlighting the pragmatic intelligence of Neanderthals in exploiting natural resources. New findings do not merely add details, they continuously challenge old assumptions. Where one generation of researchers believed Neanderthals to be purely predatory, the next demonstrated remarkable dietary diversity, from the blending of meat, marrow, tubers, and seeds to dried berries and medicinal herbs. Where archaeologists once thought meals were solely individual and survived, new evidence of communal hearths, shared bone fragments, and medicinal plants indicates a deeper cultural dimension. Meals as moments of community, knowledge, transmission, and the shaping of early culinary traditions. Furthermore, the integration of microanalysis, experimental archaeology, and comparisons with modern ecosystems reveals capacities for seasonal planning, food storage, and nutrient coordination, a carefully calculated and creative culinary strategy. Modern research no longer views the Neanderthal meal as a simple chain of physiological reactions, but as a survival network bound to climate, landscape, and social behavior, and this journey of discovery is far from over. Each new excavation, each fossil sample processed with advanced techniques, has the potential to rewrite a fragment of the ancient culinary story, opening further insights into eating habits, food preparation, and environmental knowledge accumulated by Neanderthals. The Neanderthal diet, therefore, is not merely a closed legacy, but an open doorway leading modern humans back to the origins that shaped both biology and culture, while reminding us of the profound connection between food, survival, and communal intelligence across tens of thousands of icy years.